This is a solid board. It's just one individual board, piece of poplar. And it's not small by any means. I think it's over 10 inches if I'm not mistaken. It is, yeah, just a little bit more than 10 inches in width. Now, if I was to glue this panel into the bottom of, say, like a box, or I'm building a drawer, and I glue this panel in place, whether it's a groove or a dado inside near the bottom of the sides, or whether it's a rabbet on the bottom of the sides, if I glue this all the way in, all the way around, then everybody on the internet's going to yell at me and say, you're not supposed to do that because you did not allow proper room for expansion and contraction, right? Well, rightfully so. That would be the case. I did not allow room for expansion and contraction. Wood, solid wood like this, is just like a sponge. It swells up with moisture, whether you're pulling moisture out of the atmosphere it's in, or it just completely shrinks down as it dries out. So regardless, wood is constantly moving. Whether you see it or not, it's constantly moving. And if you don't allow proper room for expansion and contraction, something's got to give. That's where you have breakage in your projects. So if I was to glue this into a bottom of a drawer, like I said, then as it absorbs moisture and expands out, then odds are you're going to have some type of problem with the case that it's glued into. If this was to shrink after it's being completely glued in, well, this corner's pinned with glue, this corner's pinned with glue, and then somewhere in the middle, you're going to develop a crack, right? Sounds logical. You don't glue in solid wood panels like this. On the opposite side of that spectrum is an engineered panel. So this is a drawer in my miter saw station. I'm not going to measure it, but you can get a feel for how big it is just by me interacting with it. It's a fairly large drawer. And the bottom panel, as you can see here from the exposed plywood edges, is just glued and screwed right to the bottom. It's a utilitarian project. I'm not really worried about hiding this plywood edge, so gluing it and screwing it to the bottom is no problem whatsoever. You can get away with this because plywood is more dimensionally stable than solid wood. There's several plies that make up plywood, and each individual ply or each individual layer is glued 90 degrees to the ones around it. And that kind of mitigates or drastically reduces the expansion and contraction issues that you have with solid wood. So in this case, gluing it to the bottom, completely securing it, not an issue at all. Everything that I just said is true, but it doesn't really apply to this particular project. Let me bring you in closer and show you what this is. This is a poplar tray and something that I have to recreate today. This is 40 years old. That's 4 with a 0. It was built in Wisconsin, and about 5 years after it was built, it was moved to Mississippi for the past 35 years or so. I may have those numbers off, but basically, this was built in one climate and moved to another climate, and it spent its entire life in Mississippi in a non-climate controlled environment. So what's going on with this? This is a poplar tray, and the bottom panel is glued and nailed along its entire perimeter to the sides. This is a solid panel poplar bottom, and as you can see, there's no cracks in it. This has survived 40 years, 2 different distinct climates, no climate control, and it hasn't self-destructed, blown up, turned into poof of a dust. It has not destroyed itself. So why hasn't it? Not exactly sure why. There's a couple things to think about here. First off, this bottom panel, it is glued and nailed to the sides all the way across, but it's only 1/2 inch thick, so the thinner you go with your material, the less crazy the expansion and contraction problems will be. In my experience, I've noticed that. And then number 2, the gentleman who owns this is very fond of using boiled linseed oil to stabilize raw wood. So if I was a betting man, I would bet that this has several coats of boiled linseed oil over the years. How much does that slow down expansion and contraction, sealing off the wood? I'm not exactly sure. But to me, when I first saw this and I was told how old it is, I thought that just doesn't make any sense. 17 3/4 of an inch wide. That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever to secure a solid wood panel. There's 3 poplar pieces glued together at here's the seams with no signs of damage whatsoever. That's pretty crazy. So my task for today is to recreate this tray. It's all poplar. Like I said, I've got a stack of poplar right here. The sides, where your handles are 3/4 of an inch thick. The front and back are 1/2 of an inch thick, and the bottom itself is 1/2 of an inch thick as well. So I think I'm prepared to do some woodworking sin today and glue on a solid panel, so just don't yell at me. This has already been done before. Got the bottom panel done, sitting in clamps. It's still too thick. I need to sand it down to its final thickness, and I think I'm going to have to use the drum sander, open-ended drum sander for that, because this is bigger than my jointer and planer. So let's go to the front, back, left, and right. The sides are milled to their final dimensions, 3/4 of an inch thick and 3/4 of an inch taller than the front and back, which are 1/2 inch thick pieces. So there's a lot of weird dimensions here. And speaking of weird, I think the joinery is weird, and I think the joinery is inaccurate on this original reproduction. So this original reproduction, again 40 years old, it has box joints all the way around. And I think that that's inaccurate because everything that's on these original chests is dovetail joints, not box joints. The sides of the entire chest are dovetailed together and then covered up with a steel brace around each one of the corners for added strength. So they knew and understood the importance of dovetail joints. Now, if you look at the original drawing for these trays, and I'll put it on the screen, the original drawings to me don't look like dovetail joints. Don't look like box joints. To me, that looks like we're looking at the end grain of the tailboard and the long grain of the pin board. To me, that says it's a dovetail joint, because if it was a box joint or finger joints, what's the importance and what's the reasoning for going with an offset spacing? It just doesn't make any sense. So I think the original was dovetailed. I think that this reproduction is inaccurate, but for what I'm doing and for what I was asked to do, which was duplicate this, I'm going to go ahead and do the box joints, finger joints. And I think the easiest way to do that, since there's not that many of them and it is kind of offset spacing, is to just use the table saw with a regular blade. One great benefit of using a full kerf blade is it's 1/8 of an inch thick, and a lot of numbers are evenly divisible by 1/8 of an inch in the imperial system anyway. A lot of basic measurements that you'll see over and over again. So these pieces, the front and back, are 2.5 inches wide, and then the sides are 3.25 inches wide. Both of those are easily divisible by 1/8. So what I can do is pretty much get really good spacing just by using the gauge or the ruler on my table saw fence and using a miter gauge to push this through. Now, using the miter gauge and the fence in conjunction with one another is typically frowned upon. You don't really want to do that. However, nothing's being trapped anywhere. I'm pushing it all the way through. That's fine. It's stuff. You don't want to do that when you have offcuts dropping down into the space between the blade and the fence. This is completely supported and being pushed all the way through, so no danger there using the fence to measure off of. Now, due to the side pieces being taller than the front and back, the joints are not symmetrical on those pieces, so for them, the sides, I'm going to take my time to trace them out and mark them just so I don't accidentally screw something up. For the rest of the detail on the side pieces, I'll just trace them out and cut to my line. Those joints are really tight and the frame is square, so I'm not even going to worry about clamping it. The top or bottom panel has been in clamps for about 2.5 hours now, so I'm going to go ahead and get this down to its final thickness. Also, to prevent the little black streaks from appearing on your material when using pipe clamps, run a little strip of packing tape. It's effective, it's quick, and it's easy. And with that, this project is done. My work here is done. Very basic project, but I think that the bottom situation was interesting enough to actually record it. I wasn't going to record this, I was just going to get it done real fast. But like I said, that bottom is interesting. It doesn't make any sense. I'm curious to know your thoughts. Do you think that this bottom has survived for 40 years, being completely pinned down, held in place, not allowing for expansion and contraction? Do you think that the reason it has survived is due to maybe the species being poplar, maybe because it's 1/2 inch thick, maybe because we very likely have several coats of boiled linseed oil on here? I don't know, but I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, so leave me a comment, and maybe we can all learn something. This is a little bit shorter than the one down here, and that's because they go in two different types of chests. The chests themselves are the exact same, but the interior dividers and such are slightly different. So I could use this as a guide, but the height is just the only difference. And what else? Oh, the nails on the bottom. I did not put any nails in this bottom panel because all of my nails are very modern. Now the nails that are on the bottom of this are modern nails as well, but the guy that's getting this, I gave him the option to put some of his own cut nails in there, a little bit more period specific, and he liked that as well. So that's why I didn't put nails on the bottom. There will be nails, but just not right now. That's it for this video. You guys take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you in the next one.